After 22 years, could a prisoner deal between Hamas and Israel see Marwan Barghouti released? Barghouti is Palestine's best-known political prisoner. He was a leading figure in the first and second intifada and was Secretary General of Fatah when he was arrested in 2002. He was accused of orchestrating the murder of Israelis, charges which he denied. On his conviction, he was given 5 life terms in prison. He is often compared to Nelson Mandela. He has continued to top opinion polls as the next potential Palestinian presidential candidate, even from prison. It has been reported that Hamas has put Barghouti at the top of the list of prisoners it would like to see released in any exchange deal with the Israelis. Earlier this month, his son, Marwan Barghouti, was in London to raise awareness about the violence his father and other Palestinians have received in Israeli prisons since the 7th of October. Could his father be the next Palestinian leader? Will he be released soon? Here's what he told us. Marwan Barghouti, thank you so much for joining us here in London. And my first question was just, why are you here in London right now? What brings you here?
So I'm here to work on my father's campaign. My father, Marwan Barghouti, who has been in prison for 22 years. I want to raise the awareness about the political prisoners issue. It's an issue that hits every Palestinian, because if you haven't been arrested in your life, you have someone in your family who either has been arrested or is arrested right now in prison. What's happening in Israeli prisons is just sad to think about. We lost many prisoners since October 7th, and I think that the Israeli government is using the fact that everybody is busy with their genocide that is taking place in Gaza to use that to torture and to practice the collective punishment policy that they have been practicing against all Palestinian people. And I think it's a great opportunity to come after the elections, after the positive results that we saw and the impact that Gaza had on the elections in here, to speak to people, to speak to politicians, and to relaunch the campaign in London.
And I'm glad you brought up the prisons, because I wanted to ask really about how your father's doing, because I've seen reports that he's been really poorly treated, and I wondered what the latest news you have of your father is.
So after October 7th, unfortunately, he's been targeted because they know his influence and impact on the Palestinian people overall, and also on the prisoners. He was moved to solitary confinement end of last year. When they moved him, the head of the prison in Ofer prison wanted to make an example of him in front of other prisoners, so he forced his hands behind his back, which had his shoulder dislocated, and he didn't get any medical treatment after that. He was moved to 4 or 5 prisons since then. And they move prisoners when they want to humiliate them, because they know that transporting a prisoner is a humiliating experience overall. They used very ugly tactics against him, like putting a spotlight in his cell, a cell that is very tiny, it could barely fit his body. They put some speakers on the door with running the declaration of the creation of the State of Israel and the Israeli national anthem on very high volume to prevent him from sleeping. On March 6th, we heard very disturbing news that he was attacked physically by the security guards. He got injured in his face, his shoulder, and his foot. He didn't get any treatment, and the Israelis, of course, denied those allegations. But we confirmed that when the lawyer finally could meet him after so much pressure, and he saw that he lost weight because they barely give him food to survive, and that his physical state is not that great, and he didn't get any treatment for it. But on the mental side, he's still very strong as we know him, and he's very positive about the future. But he's also concerned about what he heard about the numbers of people that got slaughtered and killed, and about the status of the prisoners inside prison as well.
I wondered, how you get news about your father and what news he can get. Like, how does that work?
So after October 7th, he was in Ofer prison, so he heard about October 7th, he heard about what's happening, and then he was moved to solitary confinement. For months, he couldn't see anyone, and he didn't hear much news about what's happening in the outside. But then after pressure, the lawyer could visit him finally, and he passes some news to him and what's happening in general. He can't get into the details because there is so much like surveillance on the visit, and there is a guard in each side, which makes it impossible to speak freely. So we don't know much about what he thinks about what's happening, but we know that he's concerned, and at the same time we know that he's very optimistic about a future for Palestinians, because he's one that believes that sacrifices are unfortunately necessary to move forward in our struggle for independence and statehood.
I wanted to talk to you about your father potentially coming out. I've heard, he's on the top of the list that Hamas has of people they'd like to be released, prisoners they want to be released in any sort of negotiated exchange, perhaps. But I've also heard, or we've reported, that the PA has blocked your dad, and there's some questions around the U.S. and what the U.S. is doing. What's going on with your dad in this list?
So we are very positive that he will be released. I think that there is a great chance that him and other Palestinian political prisoners, hopefully all of them, will be released. I think he's someone who spent 22 years in prison, and it's time for him to be back amongst the Palestinian people. They understand his influence and impact on the Palestinian people. And it's something that would move things forward, because I feel that my father represents a solution rather than a problem, because he's someone who is clear about his support for the two-state solution. He worked very hard for it in the 90s, and he still believes in that. I think he's one of the last generations that still believe in the two-state solution, even though it has a very tiny chance with the expansion of settlements and with the settler terrorism that we see going around in the West Bank. And I don't think that any Palestinian doesn't want my father to be released. I refuse to believe that any Palestinian wouldn't want my father to be released. Otherwise, they need to test their DNA and see if they're Palestinian in the first place, because everybody knows that on the human level first, it's really time for him to be with his family, and also everybody knows that he's someone who represents a positive and has positive influence on the Palestinian people, and to move us forward for unity, and he believes in political partnership, which is exactly what we need as Palestinians.
Well, I'm curious about Western governments and the impression you get from them about how they see your dad. Do you get the impression that they also see that he could be the way forward, he could be a leader? Are they helping you to try to get him out?
Yes, many governments have shown great interest in him as someone who represents a solution. They also interfered when the conditions were going really ugly with him, and this is a positive sign for us to see that they are serious about it. And I do think that many politicians and officials in the Western governments, maybe they're not as outspoken as we want them to be about it, but they do support his release, and I don't think any of them would veto his release, because they know what he represents for the Palestinian people, and that a unified Palestinian people is a positive thing, not only for the Palestinian people but also for the whole region.
Well, speaking of unified, Hamas have said that they want to join the PLO and have a unified PLO with everyone involved. How do you think your father would feel about that? How do you feel about that?
I think so. Before, we need to remember that my father is the one who initiated the prisoners document that was signed in 2006 by all Palestinian political parties, and it was a historical document because it was the first that every political party signs on. It stated clearly that Palestine will be on the 67 borders, and limited the resistance only within the 67 borders, and that was a huge thing to pull off. And I think every Palestinian would love to see all Palestinian political parties under the PLO and unified together, and maybe we can have democratic elections as soon as possible to be able to have a new leadership that can take us forward into statehood.
Do you think elections will happen?
Yes, eventually they have to happen. I mean, we're aspiring for becoming a democratic state. We did some steps after the Oslo Accords, but I think in the last 18 years, unfortunately, we haven't had any elections, which is very, disturbing for us. Like me and my generation have never voted before, and we are waiting for the chance to be able at least to vote when I go to around Europe or here or any other country. It pains me to see that there are parliamentarians who are in their 20s and 30s, ministers, and we haven't had a chance to even vote. And this is something that needs to change, and hopefully we will have democratic elections as soon as possible.
I wanted to go back to your dad's release. What are the challenges? Who's blocking his release? I mean, obviously I know it needs to be negotiated, but it has sounded like in the back end, people have been moving things, trying to get him off. What are the challenges you're facing in terms of that?
I mean, we need to remember that this period is not about my father. This period is about Gaza and about the people and the citizens of Gaza. And I think that the safety and security of the people of Gaza needs to be the top priority right now. And after this issue gets solved, which is the permanent ceasefire, which we've been calling for so long, and the full withdrawal of the Israeli forces from Gaza, I think then we can talk about anything else. And as I said, I do think that it's a real chance, and we're very positive that my father will be released, and this is what we're focused on. But we need to always be mindful and respectful to the the slaughter that is happening in Gaza, and to put it as the priority for any discussion when we talk about this.
It's obvious it's been 22 years since your dad was taken away that day and then has been imprisoned ever since. I just wonder, he keeps topping opinion polls, even now. Why do you think he's so popular?
I think he's popular not because he promised the Palestinian people with building roads or infrastructure or anything like that, but because he stated clearly that if the last thing that he has to give to the Palestinian people and to give to the Palestinian cause is his life, he's willing to do so, and he is doing that. He's someone who's spending his 30th year in prison overall. He was exiled for 7 years as well. He's never lived a normal life, and yet he didn't see that as an obstacle to make him a leader and to educate himself. He's someone who holds a master's degree and a PhD in political science. And the most important thing is that we Palestinians are very hungry for unity and for political partnership between the political parties. I think that it was so harmful for us, the division, the black division, and that happened since 2007. And he's someone who can contribute into that and bring unity into the Palestinian people. People also respect in him that he has an anti-corruption policy, and he's very outspoken about it. And at the same time, he's someone who would never compromise on Palestinians' rights. And at the same time, he's willing to negotiate for Palestinians' rights with the Israelis and with other parties to get to a place where we can have our own state with independence and to live with dignity. And I think this is the need for any Palestinian, and that's why they respect that in him.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about other prisoners right now who are maybe in a similar position to your dad. I know your dad was made an example of, but you mentioned others kind of going through really hard times right now. I wonder if you could shed more light on what's going on. And also on the, you had mentioned when you're transferred, it's very humiliating. I don't really know much about that. I'd be interested to understand more about that.
Yeah, so the documented cases that have been killed inside prison, either for medical neglect or by actual beating, are maybe now between 15 and 20 prisoners. We don't know the numbers. That's of course excluding the number of Gazan prisoners that got killed and undocumented, and we think that there are tens of prisoners that got killed inside. When they move a prisoner, they put them in the vehicle, the Israeli vehicle, and they move them. They beat them up on the way. They put their hands behind their back all the way, and they know that there are no cameras, no surveillance, so they can do whatever they want with them. And this is why transporting prisoners is one of the harshest experiences that prisoners can go through. Of course, in addition to the solitary confinement, in addition to the fact that they are not getting enough food. I know some prisoners who got out of prison that I couldn't recognize anymore because they lost so much weight, and they were not doing well mentally because of the torture that they were going through. And this is why when we hear this and when we look at this, and then we hear politicians and officials speaking about the international law, it doesn't mean anything for us Palestinians. And we're always asked, what about, Hamas? What about this? What about that? As if we're the problem. But we need to remember that the root cause of the problem in Palestine is the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories. And this is exactly where we need to focus and solve the problem, not looking at Palestinians as if we're subhumans. Why don't, like one of the narratives that came up during this trip and other trips is, why don't they take them in Jordan or Egypt? I think this is one of the most racist statements that you can say, because at the end of the day, we're not Jordanians nor Egyptians, we're Palestinians. And it should be very clear that we are not moving, and we need to remind everyone that the Israeli objective about what they're doing is ethnically cleansing the Palestinian people, and they're using genocide to ethnically cleanse us. Like, how evil more can you be than that? And going back to the prisoners, I think it's a very important issue. And it's very sad to see the Israelis using the fact that the attention is on their genocide on Gaza to keep torturing the prisoners under the orders from no other than Ben-Gvir.
I wonder, in your conversations here in London this week, what will your message be to the politicians here? How can the UK government help you?
I think the UK government can help by pressuring the Israeli government and by stopping to spoil the Israeli government, by saying, we can't sanction Israel, we can't do this, we can't do that. If they want to prove to their people, before they prove to us, to their people, that they are true to their values, they need to be very firm about calling for a ceasefire. They need to recognize the state of Palestine, and then take real steps into sanctioning, if they have to, sanctioning the Israeli government into having the ceasefire. I think that if we don't have any ceasefire in the near future, the results will be irreversible if they're not already there. And in order to see any kind of stability in the Middle East, the first thing that needs to happen is, after we do the ceasefire and after supporting the Palestinian people, we need to have the end of the illegal occupation of Palestine, because this is the root cause that will always cause issues, because you can't ask Palestinians to stop resisting, which is legal by international law, to resist your occupier, to stop resisting while the occupation is there. There will be, I think my father said it in court more than 20 years ago, there will be no peace nor security for the Israeli people as long as there is occupation, and I think the fact still applies now.
I guess the last thing I really wanted to ask you, and if there's anything I haven't brought up that you want to talk about, tell me. But I did also want to ask you, my sense is that your dad was arrested when you were 11.
Yes.
And I wondered, when was the last time you saw him? And if he does come out soon, what would you like to do with him?
So I saw him the last time a year and a half ago, because this is something that exists way before October 7th. When he was arrested, I was 11, and then I would see him twice a month until I turned 16. After 16, I would see him once a year, sometimes every 2 years, and in some cases every 3 years. it's really sad because I haven't been able to even touch my father for 22 years now. The first thing I want to do is, of course, to hug him and to make sure that we catch up. I give him every single detail about my life. He has 6 grandchildren that he's never met before. He only knows them through the pictures. I want to get a chance to have just a normal life with him. I really don't, like, as a son, I don't care that much if he's gonna play a leadership role or anything like that. That's for him to decide and for the Palestinian people to decide. But for me, I just want to have a normal life with him. I just want him to spend time with my mother, who has been, sacrificing much for the family. And when he was arrested, she had 4 teenagers that she had to raise. She was doing her master's degree, and instead of going back home and being depressed or crying about what's happening, she founded the campaign to release Marwan Barghouti, and she then founded the international campaign from Nelson Mandela's cell. She went all over the world to take his message, and I think that she is the reason why my father is recognized nationally and internationally. So I would love for her to finally live the promise that he promised her 40 years ago, that when Palestine is independent and free, we can finally live with our children and grandchildren a normal life. There are many, many prisoners who are suffering and who got out of prison. So it would be great if you can cover the prisoners, have interviews with them, see exactly the details, the humiliation that they go through during the prison time, because that matters, and that makes the Israelis see that, okay, some people are putting some attention there, so we need to be careful, at least with the prisoners.
Yeah, when you said 15 to 20 had maybe been killed, that's what I kind of got thrown off, because I was thinking, well, but that means there's so many more that are being harmed that we don't hear about, probably.
Yeah, so, and tens more that have been killed also that are undocumented.
Yeah, these are you said the prisoners in the Gaza prisoners. Are these ones that were taken to these sort of strange dark site kind of thing? Right, okay. Exactly. Yeah. Well, we will look into this, and thank you for raising that with us.
Thank you, of course.
Cool, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.